Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a chocolate butter cake, and this is what it looks like. This cake has 2 layers of moist and soft chocolate cake, and then we're going to sandwich them together and frost the cake with a chocolate fudge frosting. So to start, you need to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius, and then you will need 2 9-inch, which is 23 centimeter, baking pans, and you want pans with 2-inch sides, which is about 5 centimeters, and then you can either butter your pans or you can spray them with a nonstick spray, which is what I'm going to do here today. And then what we want to do is line the bottom of the baking pans with a round of parchment paper. Now, if you didn't have parchment paper, you could butter and then flour your pans. That way to make sure they won't stick. So that's that. And then the first thing we're making a chocolate cake. So the first thing we need to do is to melt our chocolate. So in a heat-proof bowl, I have 4 ounces, which is 120 grams of unsweetened chocolate. And as the name implies, this is chocolate that does not contain any sugar. It's chocolate, what we call in its rarest or most basic form. So it's quite bitter. And what you want to do is finely chop it, like I've done here. And then this cake has a really nice complex chocolate flavor, and that's because we're not only using the unsweetened chocolate, we're also going to use 3 tablespoons, 25 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder. So, and you can use either just a regular unsweetened, or you could use Dutch processed, whatever you have in the house. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually also dissolve the cocoa powder too, along with melting the chocolate, because if you do that, it really brings out the cocoa powder's full flavor. So what I'm using here is 1 cup of just coffee coffee I had this morning. So, and you want it really hot because we want to melt that chocolate. Now, if you go, I don't want a coffee flavor, then just use 1 cup, 240 milliliters of just boiling water. So either way. And then what you're going to do is just stir this to dissolve the cocoa powder and melt the chocolate. And then what we're going to do is let this sit a little, because of course I used a really hot liquid and we don't want to use that in our cake batter. So I'm just going to let this sit on the counter and let it cool down to room temperature. And when we come back, we will start our cake batter. Okay, so our chocolate is melted and it's cooled down to room temperature, so we can start our chocolate cake batter. Now, if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer as well. And the first thing we need is 1 cup, 225 grams of butter. Have that at room temperature. And you can, as you know, I prefer unsalted butter. I prefer the flavor, and that way I can also control the amount of salt in my cake. If you prefer salted, then, by all means, you can use that. So what I'm going to do is just beat the butter until it gets nice and smooth. Okay. Another reason to beat your butter first before you add your sugar is just in case, maybe your butter is not quite at room temperature, then this way it does soften it, beating it. So now what we're going to add is 1 cup, 200 grams of granulated white sugar. Let's put that in there. And also 1 cup, 205 grams of firmly packed light brown sugar. Now you may say that seems like a lot of sugar, but remember we are using unsweetened chocolate and unsweetened cocoa powder, so you need quite a bit of sugar to sweeten that. So now what I'm going to do is beat the butter and the sugar together until it's nice and light and fluffy on medium-high speed. That might take, depending on what type of mixer, take several minutes. looks good. So this is what we're looking for. It gets a little lighter in color, nice and fluffy. So that will produce a cake that's nice and light and fluffy, which is what we want. So next, we're going to add 3 large eggs, and have your eggs at room temperature. They mix in much better when they're at room temperature. And just add 1 at a time, beat that in, each one in. And then we're also going to add some pure vanilla extract, because I think chocolate, coffee, and vanilla is a perfect combination. So 2 teaspoons, 8 grams of pure vanilla extract, and then I'm going to add 1 of my eggs. And beat that in. Next egg. And the final one. Looks good. And as always, scrape down the sides and the bottom of your bowl as much as you need to. You want to make sure everything is all mixed together. Okay, so now we're going to add our chocolate. So this is why we wanted it to cool down, because what you wouldn't want to do is add like a hot melted chocolate to your batter, because then it would kind of melt it. So pour that in. And now start your mixer on low speed when you're mixing this in so it doesn't come up in your face. Just gonna scrape my bowl here, make sure that's all mixed in. Really smell the chocolate in here. Okay, just gonna mix that just for a second longer. Okay, it's good. So now we need our flour. So you will need 2 1/4 cups, which is 295 grams of all-purpose flour, or you may know that as plain flour. And then you will need 2 teaspoons, which is 10 grams of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon, 6 grams of baking soda. Now, if you say that seems like a lot of leavening for this cake, keep in mind that whenever you're using cocoa powder, unsweetened cocoa powder, it tends to have a drying effect in your cakes. So you tend to add a little more leavening to counteract that. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon, 2 grams of salt. Now, if you use salted butter, you might even want to just leave that salt out. And then you can either sift everything together, or I'm just whisking. You want to make sure that that baking powder and baking soda is really mixed into your flour. You don't want any pockets of a large amount of either one of those. And you will also need 1 cup, 240 milliliters of milk. You can either use, I'm using a whole milk or a full fat milk. You could also use a 2% if you reduce fat if you want. So now what we're going to do, you don't want to add all that flour at once, because you'd have to mix and mix and mix, and then that tends to make your cake a little tougher. So what we're going to do is add the flour in 3 additions and alternate that with our milk. So just put, about 1/3 of our flour mixture in there. Just eyeball it and then mix that in. And then add about 1/2 of your milk. Add a little more flour. And the rest of your milk. And the rest of my flour. You don't want to overbeat, you just want to beat the flour just until it's incorporated, because if you overmix, again, you can get a little, it can toughen your cake, which we don't want, when nice and soft and moist. So I'm going to actually just finish mixing that flour in by hand. Again, make sure you get that bottom the bowl, because at least in mine it tends to stick at the bottom. Oh, what a beautiful looking pattern. Now you can see this makes a large cake, 2-layer, perfect for birthdays and things like that, anniversaries, special occasions, or when you're having a large group. Okay, I think that's good. So what we need to do is to evenly divide our batter between our 2 pans. So you can eyeball this, or I'm actually going to weigh, because sometimes my eye doesn't seem to be that accurate. So if you have a scale, it's perfect for this. So I'm just going to even this out to see. Because what we want is 2 layers that are the same height. So you kind of want to smooth it out there, and then I'm going to weigh it and see. Now if you're weighing, make sure you weigh your pans first. Try to use 2 pans of equal weight, or you're going to have to do some adjusting there. Whoop. So just put on your scale. Just I'm a little off there, but not by much. Okay, I think that's pretty accurate today. So now we're going to bake our cakes. As always, everyone's oven is a little different, and the important thing is not to overbake. If your cake tends to, if you ever find your cake is dry in texture, typically that is from overbaking. So I find for these cakes 30 to 35 minutes. I would set your oven at 30 and even check them maybe even a little before that, because we don't want them to be overbaked. And so they are done when the top will spring back. You will just start to see the cake starting to pull away from the sides of the pan, and of course a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. Okay, that's 1. And 2. We're done. As you can see, they're starting to pull away from the edges of the pan and set. And a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. So now, I'm going to let them cool about 10 minutes on a wire rack in the pan, just so that they become, cool down a bit. And then when we come back, I will show you how to take them out of the pan. So now to remove your cake from the pan, first take either a knife or just a spatula and run it all the way around just to make sure it's not sticking. And then what I do is I take a rack and flip it, and hopefully it comes off. And then just peel your paper. So, and then we want to flip it right side up. So, and there we are. So what we're going to do now is just let them cool completely, and then when we come back, we will start our chocolate fudge frosting. So now we're going to start our chocolate fudge frosting, and the first thing we need to do is melt some chocolate. So you will need 6 ounces, which is about 180 grams of either a semi-sweet or a bittersweet chocolate. And try to use, a good quality one that you just like eating on its own. And then put it in a heat-proof bowl. You can roughly chop it, and then just put it over your simmering water. And we're going to let it melt. Okay, so our chocolate is melted. Just remove it from the heat. And now it's a little hot. So what I'm going to do is just let it cool down to room temperature. You still want it fluid, but we want it at room temperature because we don't want to add hot chocolate to our frosting and melt everything. So, and then when we come back, we will finish off our frosting. Okay, so our chocolate has cooled to room temperature. So for our frosting, if you have an electric stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could just use a hand mixer for this. First ingredient we need is 1 cup, 225 grams of butter, and you can use either salted or unsalted, whatever your preference. And then I'm just going to beat that just to smooth it out. Okay. And then we're going to add some 2 cups, which is 230 grams of confectioner sugar. You may know that as powdered or icing sugar. And because it normally, it just has lumps, I like to put it through, I'm just using a strainer, or you could use a sifter. Get rid of all those lumps. So, and then I'm going to flavor this with 1.5 teaspoons, which is about 6 grams of pure vanilla extract. If you don't want the vanilla flavor, you could just leave that out. But like I said, chocolate and vanilla, to me, just goes together. So now I'm going to add my sugar. And then I'm going to beat this. I want to get some air. I want to not only mix them together, but I want to start to get some air into this frosting to make it nice and light. So I'm going to beat it for a couple minutes. Of course, start out slow. You don't want that sugar coming up in your face. Okay, that looks good. So you can see, getting nice and light and fluffy. And then the last ingredient, we only have one more ingredient, is our melted chocolate. So always make sure to check the temperature. Have it at room temperature. If it's too hot, then what you're going to find is it's going to kind of melt the butter and the sugar, which if that happens, because sometimes if you're in a rush it can, then you're going to just pop your the frosting into the refrigerator for a little bit to firm everything up, and then you can just re-whip it. So don't think it's a total disaster if that happens to you. It happens to the best of us. So now what I'm going to do is just beat this for a few minutes, just to mix everything together, plus again to make it lighter and fluffier. This is such a good frosting. Okay, so Okay, I think our frosting is done. So this is what it looks like. You can see it lightens in color quite a bit. If your color may be a little different than mine depending on what type, whether you use a semi-sweet or a bittersweet, and then even the brand can affect. So, oh, so beautiful. So now we have, I'm just putting I put one cake layer on a cake stand or plate, platter, whatever you're using. If you have one of those turntables, you might want to put it on there. So I'm just we want like a nice layer. Sandwich our two cakes together. So I'm just using a long spatula here. You could use a knife. Just spread it. I don't go right to the edge because, when you put the next layer on top, it tends to squash it a bit. Depends how thick a layer you like. Okay, yeah, it looks good. I really like the combination of the dark chocolate cake and the lighter chocolate frosting. It's such a pretty cake. Okay, so let's try to make it even as you can. So now we'll try to transfer our top layer. Now my cakes are still a little soft. Hopefully it won't crack, but then you don't have to worry if yours cracks a little. It doesn't matter because we're frosting the top and sides of our cake. So what you want to do is kind of make sure it's even. And now I'm going to frost the top. I'm going to do the top and the sides, so I'm just going to put some frosting. I like to just put my frosting on the top, and then I'll show you how I do it. What you can also do is I slopped a little on you could kind of tuck some wax paper or parchment paper all around the edges there if you want, so that you don't have to clean up your cake platter after you finish frosting. But I forgot to do that. So now what I do is I just take a little of the frosting, and then push it down the sides. Let me see what I'm doing here. And then just kind of go back and forth. Like so. Just keep doing that all the way around. Then we can even it out once we've finished all of the sides. Okay, so I've almost finished the sides. And then you could go around. I like it a little rough, kind of like this. It's kind of like the cake my mom always made was kind of this way. If you wanted to, you could take your spatula and reel at a bit of an angle if you wanted it to be perfectly smooth and just work your way around. But I like just like an old-fashioned chocolate cake. And then just kind of this top, just decorate it as you want. Now you could, I just like it like that. To me, that's just perfect. For a birthday, you put some candles in there and you're set. You could put some sprinkles on top. Sometimes, depending, I like to pile fruit, like some strawberries and raspberries and blackberries in the center, maybe with some mint leaves. But today, I think it's perfect. So let's try a piece. So, this is a sharp knife. As you can see, this is a fairly large cake for, I'd say, 12, 14 people it will serve. And then what I like to do, just to get a clean slice, have a piece of paper towel and just wipe your knife between slices. use my knife for this. Oop, see if I can get it out. Oh, look gorgeous. It's just, you know, the layers are nice and moist and soft. And then, of course, the frosting. Okay, so try a little. Oh, that's a great, you know, old-fashioned chocolate cake. It's soft, it's moist, it has a really nice chocolate flavor. And of course, that chocolate fudge frosting is just to die for. So try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.